requiring social justice awareness and being conscious in a radically, ripplingly, racially profiled area, I think, of life is maybe something that we struggle with, one as a race and um, as a central body of just believers. I think most African Americans are believers. Whether it's like, we believe in the same God, I call them different names or whatever. I think most African Americans are spiritual. I think the problem with that is that the Bible has been influenced by so much of the giver of the Bible that we receive, that it is taught, perceived, inherited, that it is learned by us that we should be loving and never retaliating, and then to the response of give love but expect it not back in return. So we're always talking about the way that God is love, that Christ requires us to love, but then we never really talk about the God of war when it comes back to the retaliation of, the vengeance of, the reaping of. And I think some of the best stories are of stories that have a victor and a seeming villain. The problem with us Black believers, African American believers, brown believers, light-skinned believers, is that we always see ourselves as the victimizer. Can't hear nobody. We're the villain as long as we're protecting the village that the real villain, the enemy, is victimizing. We never make them accountable. What's that? We never make them accountable for how they persecute and prosecute us. But then we hold ourselves accountable for how we respond as we die. Yeah. And I want to be spiritually relational because I'm a spiritual person. But I think some things in the social justice, in the race profiling, in like the blatant assassination attack over people who look like me, I think they won't receive anything that's spiritual, because I think it paints a picture of God being weak, paints a picture of God being passive. But see, the God that I know is a God who in Galatians 6 says he's not mocked, that everything that you sow, you'll reap. But believe that what you put out there, you're going to get back. I'm not talking about social equality. I'm not talking about racial equality. I'm talking about Black lives, period. Because at some point in time, we have to stop screaming to deaf ears, we matter, and stop protesting to blind eyes that like my life has purpose. When our lives, period, is not under attack, then the question changes from do we matter to now what else matters. Until then, I really can't worry. Hear me cautiously now. I really can't worry about how I'm being perceived by the devil, that I am not loving enough as a believer when the enemy is killing us because we're too soft, or that we are favored by the God who created us and made me a believer in him. Jesus is prime example. We're like waiting for him to show us through script, be loving, be of love, be of kindness, be of cheer, be good. And yes, on the cross, he didn't say a mumbling word, but know that he said, it'll heap coals on the head of the one who betrayed me. And that night, not 30 years from then, that night, Judas hung himself. that night, the temple and the veil in the church tore in half. That night, the earth shook as dead folk raised from the dead, as folk who were alive and well like fell to their knees and died, as those who would deny him, betray him, turn him over, Caesar, Pilate, I believe, died that night. We're not talking about a passive 30-year revenge-seeking savior. We're talking about the son of, who requires nothing less than God take care of his children, who like testify of him. Says vengeance is his. Absolutely. The problem is that we take it abstract because it's something that we want God to take care of. But if God is the provider and the vengenizer, then if we expect him to fight for us, expect him to provide for us. If we don't wait for God for our food, then I'm not waiting for God for my fight, because I prepare myself in the full armor and show up that I may be able to stand the wiles of the enemy. No, I don't come fighting with cuss words. I come fighting with the justice system that he is on the shoulders of. It is, God has invested the power in you that every giant David would face, he would defeat it, not be passive about it. To be passive to it is the same as being the Goliath of it. If you don't attack it and defeat it, you're just as bad as standing there with it to fight against us. And I think that when we stop fighting for our right to live, then we can stop fighting about what they consider love.